Good evening. Welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring women-owned businesses from across the country. And now, for your host, Kimberly Macklemore.
All right, good evening and welcome to WSBI, your Resource for Success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses from across the country. I am your host, Kimberly Macklemore, and welcome to another night of sharing. With us, we have Totisha Phelps, author of His Life, Our Story. I Forgot to Hold On to Me While Holding On to Him. Totisha married her childhood sweetheart after he completed a 10-year prison sentence. Although she was not behind bars herself, she still became a prisoner mentally. As a woman dealing with a man with a criminal background, she has faced many obstacles rooted in misconceptions, judgments, and stereotypes. As a direct result, she even battled depression and anxiety. Although she has conquered depression, she still has moments. But to God be the glory. Learning how to meditate and talk to the Lord has allowed her to see that this journey was not only about her, but for other women like her to overcome as well. So without further ado, please help me welcome to my platform, Miss Totisha Phelps. Hey, Totisha, how are you?
Hello, Kimberly. I'm well. How about yourself?
I am doing good. I am so excited to have you on the show with me this evening. We have a whole lot to talk about, and the listeners are just going to be so excited, once they really understand why. So we're going to just start diving into it. So Totisha, though, before we really get into some of the questions, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about who Totisha Phelps is?
Who am I? I am bold, outgoing. I wear my heart on my sleeve, leave my footprint everywhere I go. I have a background in business management, entrepreneurship, and I love the Lord, and I love community service. The gift that keeps on giving is what I'm all about.
Well, all right. I love that. And so, I want to talk a little bit about how you got from point A to point B to point C. So we know that you're an author now. You're a very new author, so that part is most exciting. But there's been a journey that you have gone through to get to this point. Talk a little bit about this journey before we dive into some good girl talk about the book itself.
Oh, my. When you say journey, that's such a bold word. Well, the journey started back in New Jersey. Back in my juvenile days, I met my sweetheart back in 7th grade. Time elapsed and we grew apart. But of course, we've always made our way back to each other. And once we became young adults, we tried to, go after love again. Mm-hmm. And then my husband winds up making some bad decisions, and it landed him in prison. And during that prison time, I just was like, how we women do, it was one of those things that I told you so. Mm-hmm. And I had an attitude with him for about 2.5, 3 years, and I just didn't allow any contact with me. And then after about 2.5 years, I received a phone call, and it was a cousin that wanted to know if it was okay to release my information so that he can connect with me again. And, of course, as a woman, I wanted to say I told you so, so I accepted the invitation. Mm-hmm. And it just took off from there, and it was just like there was never any time lost. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that grew into, and I'm sorry, I'm a little congested, so I am sorry about that, but time took off, and before I knew it, I was doing prison time, and we fell in love, and we were preparing for life after prison. Mm-hmm. And not understanding what happens after prison started the real journey mm-hmm. of understanding mental health. And a part of his recovery was me relocating to North Carolina.
Okay.
And that was pretty much how the darkness started. I uprooted my life, my career, mm-hmm. Just so that it would not it would not handicap him from making a successful recovery, being reacclimated back into society. With me having a clean name, I had everything to gain, nothing to lose. So I thought.
Right.
And,
right.
It was more so of him being able to overcome the streets or death, because that was the ultimate, was the ultimate exchange if he stayed in his same environment. Mm-hmm. So I agreed with the change, not understanding how it would impact me in the long haul.
Okay.
But God definitely showed me.
Right. But let me ask you this question. So before you go on, you talked a little bit about the fact that you had stepped away. You guys had this love thing going through, after high school and all that. You knew each other. You knew some things weren't right. You knew what was going on. So explain to the listeners, what is it that gravitated you to him to continue to move forward even after the fact?
Well, as women, we love with our heart, right? Mm-hmm. Where men, they love strategically. So when we love with our heart, we're able to see the core of the person. We're able to see them beyond their faults. We don't dig into their faults until after we are in love and after we have exchanged our heart. So that was a part of it. I'm just guilty for wearing my heart on my sleeve, and there was no prejudice with who I love. Like, my heart didn't know any different. Mm-hmm. And knowing who he was, with us knowing each other from elementary school, I knew the good boy in him, and I knew the potential of the good man he can become. But we are a product of our environment, and that was pretty much, what he's guilty of. He's guilty of being a product of his environment. Mm-hmm. And I knew that with a little bit of guidance, a little bit of love and support, that can always, be something he can overcome, especially keeping God first, and that is the center of everything that we went through, keeping God first. So understanding who he was and understanding the core of who he was and the potential of who he can become. Mm-hmm. And men are not like women, They don't understand their power. They don't understand their worth until, a woman comes along, cliche, but as they say, mm-hmm. behind every good man or every good man, there's a strong woman. And that is absolutely true. And that's our reality.
Right. And you're absolutely right. I think the thing that I'm loving that I'm hearing you say, and it's a hard thing for any woman, whether their husband or boyfriend, was ever incarcerated or currently incarcerated, knowing that you see something in them that nobody else will ever see. You knew this man who, of course, is now your husband and has been your husband for a while, that, there was something unique and special about him. But what was it that he failed to see within himself that continued beyond being just the product of the society? What continued to make him think that he was not worthy at that time to live his dream out with the woman that he loved as considered the normal life? What was his thought process on that? Okay,
so I can't speak for why for him, because mm-hmm. that would be an answer for him to answer. But what I can assume, being a part of poverty, and understanding the dynamics of the family, just from my experience, and also being a part of poverty and growing up, you're told to stick together. So even if he had it in his mind to do right, if a family member got in trouble, then it was always, our family's going to come behind and our family's going to support us. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty much the chain reaction of it, is that, when one fight, we all fight. And no matter how much I know in my heart, hey, this is not right, I'm raised to know that I have to stick with family. So, and that's what it is. It becomes you're overpowered. And I think that that's probably a product of, his reality of why he never, made change or seeked his, best of what he can do, is because he was just stuck in the poverty. Sometimes when we're sitting inside of a situation, and this is just life in general, when you're sitting inside of a situation, you really can't analyze it to its fullest capacity because you're sitting in it. But right. The moment you remove yourself from it, you're able to analyze it and say, hey, I didn't realize this is what was going on. So I think in the long run, I think prison might have was his escape, so to speak. It might come off as something negative for someone else, but when you're growing up in the hood, it can actually be a lifesaver.
Right. And I hear what you're saying. And I think that even for him, and obviously we can't really speak for him, but he definitely seen something in you, beyond the fact that you were just sticking there with him, the love, the journey, as you say, you actually have grown and had rode that ride with him together inside and outside, which we're going to dig a little bit deeper here in a few minutes. But, it's just amazing to hear your story. And obviously you're not the only woman who has had to deal with this, but you are the first person that I've ever heard really want to dive into this a little bit deeper and making people understand that there's journey, like you said, that you were holding on to him, but forgot to hold on to yourself. So let's dive and start to move forward into this portion of the discussion, because, I want to talk to everybody about the fact that you and I met each other kind of at a quirky time, and it wasn't last year, it was actually the year before. So it was funny because for my listeners, I get this call and earlier this year, and I'm like, Totisha, I haven't talked to you in over a year. Because when I met Totisha, we were actually talking about something completely different. And it was another business transaction. We never actually got through that process, but we actually had so much dialogue on talking about other things. And I'm going to let Totisha tell the story a little bit more, because it was just so phenomenal to be able to hear from a little over a year ago what happened in her life in the process after the conversation that we had. So Totisha, let's talk to listeners a little bit about how we met.
All right. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit and come forward. So just to kind of piggyback off of your last statement that my husband had to see something in me. And one of the things that I knew without a doubt that he did see in me was my strength, right? And sometimes, again, we don't see our own strength. So he definitely saw something in me that I knew that I possessed. But to the capacity, no, I wasn't there yet. And the journey kind of helped me to see the strength to another level, if you will. So when we talk about how you and I met, Kimberly and I definitely formed a sisterhood like overnight. It was like we knew each other forever. And I actually met her shortly after I created my nonprofit, which was in 2017. And the end of 2019, God said that I cannot allow the year 2020 to come in without raising awareness to my organization, which is Lock and Key Prison Wife Aftermath. And I needed to let people know who we are and what our purpose is. So a gentleman actually was watching me on Instagram, and he actually said, I find someone that I think would be a great connection for you. And he gave me Kimberly's number for podcasting. Kimberly and I got on the phone, and the conversation went left. I think we talked maybe about 2 seconds about podcasting. Kimberly asked a little bit about, who I was and what my story was. And, she was very intrigued by the story. And we started talking about becoming an author. And one of the things that I held on to through the conversation with Kimberly is that she said, never let go, never give up, because being an author it gives you power and it gives you respect. And when you go out and tell your story, not only are you telling your story, but you also command the audience attention. And as I was writing the book and I was, wanting to give up because it becomes hard and it becomes unnormal, So things that are not comfortable and familiar to us, we tend to kind of shy away from. But it was Kimberly's voice that manifested in me that said, hey, you better keep going, never give up. This gives you power. It gives you authority. And those are the things that brought me to the end of the road. So I was not ignoring Kimberly, but I would not reach out to Kimberly until I finished writing the book, because I'm a woman of my word. And there was no way I was going to contact Kimberly and talk to her in the same status. So I hadn't talked to Kimberly for about, what was it, Kimberly, a year?
Yeah. It had been just a little over a year when I got
It
the
was
call.
about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that, was my motivation to get finished. And the moment I crossed that threshold and I finished, Kimberly was the first number that I dialed. And it was like, where have you been? And it was like, I finished the book, and it was just so exciting just to, hear you share that moment with me. It was just very, it was very, it was so energetic. Like it just had so much energy behind it. It was like you were just as happy for me, and, just to be a sister, us having a sisterhood, and to feel that warmness come from you. It was like, you were happy for my success of being complete. Mm-hmm. And that was just a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and normally, when I have these conversations and I do my show, it's never about me. And, I'll always have a platform that's about elevating and uplifting the individual who's either, in business, no matter what that business is. And so they can catapult them in a way that they would not be able to reach people. And this was just so special and unique. And I was like, oh my gosh, every day we have those feelings sometimes as business people that we sit back and wonder, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we really on that right journey? Do people truly appreciate it? Are they actually listening to you? And to have somebody come back a year later and say to me, I did it. And I did it because I was listening to your voice. That to me shows and proves every day how important the power of your voice is. And in becoming an author, or whether you have a podcast show, or whether you're a speaker, whatever it is you're doing, it just proves the importance of who you are, in that people are willing to listen. And so with me and Totisha having this opportunity to just even to communicate now.
And words have power.
And words have power. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that was the key to the conversation. And like I say, even though originally when we were talking, we literally went completely over our heads about what it was that she was actually contacting me for, and so it wasn't meant to be what we thought it was supposed to be when that original phone call came. And I think that's the other important portion about this journey that you are. So here you have, your previous journey about telling your story, what you've gone through prior to writing the book, with your husband. So now what I want to talk about is the book. I want you to tell the listeners about the strength and the journey within the book and what it really truly means by the title that you have, because the title is amazing. The title again is His Life, Our Story. I forgot to hold on to me while holding on to him. Talk about that title first before you jump into the meats and potatoes, a little bit of the story.
Whoa. So his life. It was his life. It was his conviction. It was his prison sentence. However, when I decided to say, yes, I'm going to walk this journey with you,
mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Take your time. Take your time. We will continue this conversation in just a couple of seconds. Again, I have Miss Totisha Phelps on with me this evening, and she's the author of His Life, Our Story. I forgot to hold on to me while holding on to him. It's a fascinating story about her life of imprisonment with inside, even though she was outside while he was inside. So we will continue this again here in just a couple seconds. Miss Totisha is getting herself together in the background, and then we're going to move on. But I just will continue to talk a little bit more about our journey together. And like she said, having the opportunity to meet somebody over a year ago is very special and unique when you can bond like that, and realizing that you have something significant that you need to share to the world. And this is the importance that I try to teach with everybody every day about sharing your story. We all have something that people need to hear. And even when we believe that we don't have something that people need to hear, there's always somebody out there who will connect with you. And excuse me, and this story is so it's unique, but at the same time, it's consistent. We hear these types of stories. We know that there are people out there who have lived this life that Totisha has lived, and her being able to tell it and share it with people and make them understand what you are going to have to go through is important. So I'm going to check here to see if Totisha is ready to go so she can continue telling her story. Totisha, are you on?
I think I'm back.
Okay.
So I just want to apologize. I have severe allergies that just take control of my whole life.
No problem.
But I'm here.
No problem. So you go right on ahead, hon.
Yes. So what I was saying was that when I inherited this journey, I also inherited his felon and everything else that went along with it. Although I never pulled the trigger or hung out in the streets or whatever it was, the moment I said I do, it became my story. So it was his life, my story. And what that looks like when it says, I forgot to hold on to me while holding on to him. I was so consumed with making sure he was okay to overcome prison and not be a part of recidivism. I lost myself in the interim. By the time I decided to say, hey, girl, where are you? I was so far behind, it was too late. I was in the darkness, Mm-hmm. That darkness, I had no light, I had no help, and I didn't understand it. So I began to research mental health. What popped up? Depression. Depression mimicked my darkness. So now I understood what I was going through. And I need to dig it a little bit further. Why am I dark? And I knew, when did it start? It started upon release, upon the transition from one
mm-hmm.
state to another, uprooting my career. All these different life-changing events happened all at once, not to, even talk about I was raising a teenage son. I got pregnant, as soon
mm-hmm.
as I moved. There was lack of income now because I gave up the career. How am I going to take care of this new life? So with so many things just coming at me at one time, and then you have my husband who cannot even get the right job or career going to say, I am the head of the house and I am going to provide for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things let me into darkness. Well, what does that look like? I had to then research, why does he always want to stay isolated? He's always in a space by himself. And I started researching, and I come up with PTSD. So now a trigger from his PTSD led me into depression because I didn't understand what he was going through. And it was like, where's your fire? Where's the fire that I fell in love with? Now I'm using all of my fire, and I'm burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
How do we move forward? We're both burnt out at this point. His hope and faith, was compromised because everyone keeps telling me no. I want to provide for my family, but everyone's telling me no. But then you have the wife at home that says, you got this. You can do this. How do you believe in what I'm saying when the world keeps rejecting you? So I became a part of his reflection of his life, became my story.
Mm-hmm.
So when I decided to go get a job, to better our families together because we're a team, I was faced with, I'll just give you a scenario of what one of the things was that I went through was I applied to become a sheriff officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I went all the way to phase 3. So when people say, oh, marriage is just a piece of paper, is a bold-faced lie. Don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied for this position. I went all the way to stage 3, did the classes, did about 2 of the classes. And then when they said that they had to, do a background on the people that live in my household, right then and there,
mm-hmm.
I yield because here I am with a felon that has a 5-year parole sentence, and I'm talking about taking a position with a firearm. Well, guess what? I now inherit that felon because I can't do a job because of his career, his background. Mm-hmm. So it compromised my future, and it became my reality. And it got even darker because mm-hmm. the only thing that I knew, I was a retired hairstylist. That was what I've done from 13 years old to the time that I left New Jersey. And they didn't allow me to renew my license. So it just went downhill. Everything just went downhill. We lost everything. We lived off of savings for as long as we could. Mm-hmm. And it just went downhill. So how do we recover?
Yes.
How do we recover from this? You know? And it was hard. It was a hard journey. So needless to say, I was in a dark space for about 7 years. And let me just go back just a little bit.
Okay.
By the time I started my research, it was the 7th year. So I had already been dark for 7 years before I even realized, hey, this is what's going on. Mm-hmm. But that's when you have to really be in tune with the Spirit of God. Allow the Holy Spirit to really mold you, guide you, and lead you. And it was the shape of the Holy Spirit that said research. Because for that 7 years, I didn't want to see nothing, do nothing, talk to anyone. Mm-hmm. I just didn't want to be bothered. I was irritated. So when God started leading me and moving me, mm-hmm. you know, I started seeing one foot in front of the other. I started to see progress. I started to see the speck of light shine through. Mm-hmm. But how do I get to the boldness of the light? It was a journey.
Right. And I'm sure you had plenty of people telling you how you messed up and how perfect your life could have been if you hadn't done A, B, C, and D. I'm sure that was even more irritating because people weren't truly seeing or understanding why you were doing what you were doing. They were just too busy pointing fingers.
Well, one thing about me, Kimberly, you will learn. I have as I stated in the beginning, I have a very bold and gravitating personality. Mm-hmm. So it may have been a thought, but everyone knew not to ever speak those words to me.
Wow.
So they kept it as a thought, but that was the way that I was able to shun everybody out. I wouldn't receive the phone calls or, you know, I just released myself from the world because had that been implied or said, it probably would have triggered me to go back to my old ways, you know, the street life, the fighting and things like that. So for me, it was easier to just walk away and stay away. And it was even easier because we were no longer in our home state.
Right.
So that was an advantage that we had to identify. And sometimes, you know, and the way I process it now that I'm at, I won't say the end of the journey, but I am close to the end of the journey. Because there's a new page to the journey. So let's say that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes God does it for a reason and purpose. So when I look at the back and I reflect, I'm able to now process that it was always God in the midst of it. You know, it was God not only using my husband, but he used me as a tool to help my husband recover. But God also used my husband as a tool for me. To find substance and purpose in my life. So that's how I process it now when I look back. And I'm not going to say, well, I will say, you know, through the process, when it initially started happening, I'll just give you a little spill of the book. I knew that God was speaking from the beginning of the journey. I knew that I was called to do the work. When my husband was in prison, we would always have a conversation of, how are you going to come home and take care of me? The Bible says you're the head of the house. And the conversation would always be, so you think I can't take care of my family? You can't. And I would always say, no, I don't say that. But I had to be devil's advocate because you now have obstacles that are in front of you that you didn't have before that will deny you employment. So that was always something we discussed. And he always discussed that he wanted to move. And I would always act like, I guess, the man and say, yeah, okay, we're going to move. But it was just me saying what he wanted to hear. And my mind was already no. So I would say whatever he wanted to hear. And when he came home, we actually started going to purchase a home. And that turned out to be a very bad deal, which indicated to me that God said, move over and allow him to be man. So God was coming to me throughout the journey. And he was giving me lights. He was giving me signals. And I was obedient to understand what he was doing, but I wasn't all the way there yet. Mm-hmm. So I can reflect back on the journey and understand where God stuck his hand out, you know,
right,
and
right.
He gave me a lightsaber and he showed me. So I am able to identify that. And that was one of the things that he said, move over and allow him to be the man. Mm-hmm. So me leaving New Jersey was also a part of God saying, lean on me and not your own understanding. So to the audience, sometimes it may not look, you know, the way that we want to see it because we want to see clarity. We want to see the end. We want to see what's going to happen. But the way God is set up, it's not about what you can see. It's about understanding your faith in God and allowing God to be God all by himself. Mm-hmm. So I'm able to tell that story and I'm able to testify that story because of the journey and the different stages that I went through. And now he's given me a new set of lens to look out of, to see it from a different view.
Right.
And I can appreciate the journey, that it wasn't just about the man in prison, but it was about the mindset that had to change while he was in prison.
Exactly. And that is the key word, is the mindset. And even for you, you know, knowing that what you had committed to, you know, with this relationship, it had to be a mindset change for you. And obviously, definitely that was very hard in the beginning because, like you said, everything that you worked so hard for and you fought for and everything you thought that was going to be fine even afterwards, you know, bent hell over backwards to get this. And then everybody's telling you, no, you can't because you're connected. And when you become married, you become one. You don't stay two, you know, and that's where a lot of people do have that misconception about marriage, period. It's not just a piece of paper, kind of like you said earlier. And so once you understood that, your mindset had to change. So when both of your guys' mindset changed, that is the pillar of what's caused you to maintain the journey that you're continuing on and the relationship and the love that you have in your marriage is, and, you know, to continue to move you forward. But the one thing I want to hear you talk a little bit to the listeners about is that, you know, you're constantly obviously still going through this process in your journey because it's always going to be a growth mechanism for you. But how do you help other women who are going through or have gone through or going through currently now or have gone through what you have done, and especially not just through your book, but even outside of the book?
Okay, so the book is just the follow-up. The foundation or how the book even became the book is through the nonprofit organization, which God gave me, like I stated before, back in 2017, and said, listen, now that you've identified what mental health is for not only you, but for your husband, you have to now go into the world and you have to share that. You have to be the voice, help other women to identify or come to terms with, because a lot of times, and this is not just for my husband being in prison or whatever the circumstances are, just women, the way that we love. You know, we love hard, we love with emotion. Sometimes we can see it right in front of us, but we don't even acknowledge it because it doesn't look like what we envisioned it to be. So to be the voice for these women, to help them gain understanding, that's what I'm here to do. And not only just give them the understanding, but also give them a navigation, you know, to help get through, you know, where's the guide? And sometimes I see that that's what people fail to do. You can tell me what's wrong. You can tell me everything about what's wrong, but how do you aid and support me to correct what's wrong?
Exactly.
So that's what I want to do. I want to raise the awareness. I want to help them identify what's wrong, but also help them correct and make change. So that's the basis of our organization. And God has given me more to flourish in the organization as the days go on, because where it started out being about the forgotten woman, Because there's so many programs that advocate for the man when he come home from prison, and, there's work release programs and halfway house programs and all these different things that aid anything that he needs. They forget that there's someone that held his hand in the process. So that is my fight, is to be able to get the support for the women who go out and support what they go through. Because my famous line is, although he was behind bars, she becomes mentally locked up. The only difference about her and him, she gets to go home at the end of the visit. He's entitled to a release date when he comes out of prison. But when you become mentally locked up, there is no expiration date. So helping her to identify her expiration date it is my goal. I want to be able to teach that, and it goes deep for just the woman, the man, and also the children.
Exactly.
My daughter has definitely enlightened me to that aspect of incorporating that in the organization, because these children are also forgotten. The decisions that we make as adults, the man who makes the decision to go to prison, the woman who makes the decision to go into the prison, where does that put these children? How does it make the children feel? What does it do with their confidence? What does it do to these children who feels they feel ashamed?
Right.
It's a sense of a shame. So that's what I kind of want to really groom into the organization. It's not just him, her, but the children, him, her, and the children, because it's a family affair. And yeah, that's what we're on the road to, So anybody who's listening that want to, be a part and help us move this organization to the next level, and you have any talents and gifts, we're all for it. Again,
Right.
You can reach us at Lock and Key Prison Wife Aftermath. And you go out to the website and you can just click on our contact page and just leave us a little blurb, and we'll definitely get back in contact with you, because it's definitely something that goes on. It's more prevalent than people can even imagine. And if you will, Kimberly, I would love to just share an experience just so people can understand how close it truly is. But women walk around with a shame, and
Right.
my theory is, if you're ashamed of who you're with, then you might need to readdress and understand if this is a person that you really want to be with, because you can't be ashamed of who you love. And you have to teach people how to treat you, and they have to respect. You don't have to like it, but you have to respect who I love. And one of the things that I experienced is that I, like I said, my journey of trying to just get stability in my life. I went to a agency, like the workforce program, where you actually go in, like the unemployment office, I'm
Right.
assuming, and you go in there and they're supposed to help you find jobs or whatever they're supposed to do. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, these women don't have anything in comparison to what I do, the degrees
Right.
and everything, and these are people who are, I don't want to sound, I don't know how to say, but I don't want to sound like they're beneath me, but they were, and they're trying to teach me something. So one lady said to me, she was trying to tell me about a job that was like paying like minimum wage. And God said to me, it's okay to be naked and let her know who you are.
Right.
And I started divulging different information about me, and I led her to my website, and she looked at it and she's like, who did all this? And I'm like, I did it. And she said, is this you? And I'm like, absolutely. So she was more impressed by what it was that I was doing. And she said, can you wait right here? She said, I have someone that I want you to meet. Now, at this point, I'm at the Goodwill, that agency, right?
Wow.
And what she did, she went upstairs, and what happened next, it blew my mind. She actually brought the director of Goodwill to me, a woman, white collar, professional. And the woman pulled me to the side and said, can you help me with my husband? Because
Wow.
I faced the same situation, but she was not ready to wear her heart on her sleeve about who her husband was. She was living secretly because of the position that she held, and that was a part of her life that she kept to herself. Well, the first step of me helping you means that you have to accept who he is.
That's right.
so that you can walk the journey with him. Because if you can't walk the journey with him publicly, then you don't need to be with him, period.
Right.
So that was someone that I came close with. And then there was another situation where, I won't say the name of the organization, but I do have a club that I host. And, you know, my leader kind of went behind my back and ran my name. And they're only supposed to run your name once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still within a year. And to find out that I was violated because she ran my name again because she saw my organization.
Right.
They didn't look at anything else but the word prison.
Right.
They didn't care about the aftermath, my husband. They saw prison
mm-hmm.
and associated with my name and assumed that I was in some type of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And when she ran the name, you know, her and I, you know, we had a conversation and I checked her and let her know, you know, don't ever do that to me again. It was a violation. And once we became, you know, we came to an understanding,
mm-hmm.
the dialogue switched up on me like this. My husband, too, is a felon.
Wow.
Really? Really?
Wow.
So where you went to go and dissect me, you were honestly living the same mirror life. But because of the role you played, you
mm-hmm.
downplayed yourself. You downplayed me to uplift yourself. And that's what women got to get together. They
mm-hmm.
got to get it together. You got to get it together. If
right.
you're going to be with them, be with them.
Right. Well, at the end of the day.
If not, leave them alone.
Exactly. But basically, you know, like you said, it's stereotyping, it's profiling.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. You know, it's the typical thing that people do to each other. And especially they do that to our black men as well. And it's just sad, but that's the world that we live in. Excuse me.
It's okay. It's a reality. And especially, you know, with it becoming more prevalent to the eye, you know, Black Lives Matter and, you know, people being killed on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, but with everything bad, it's also something to brag and boast about. We also see our faith doing positive things. And I'm praying, it is my prayer, that with the greatness that they're starting to see within us, that they will embrace that a lot of these men, guess what? He might walk around with the word felon behind his name, and he might be innocent. You know, that's just the way the world was set up. But now everyone has a responsibility to help and aid the change. And that's what people really need to grasp out of all of this, is that in order for us to get to a resolve, everyone has to reach back. Everybody has to add a piece of something, because everybody has a skill, everybody has a talent, everybody has a voice. And these men, you know, who are bound to poverty, they didn't ask to be born of poverty. I didn't ask to be born of poverty, but it is our reality. And another spin on my organization is that teaching financial literacy is first and foremost. Understanding the power of a dollar, understanding how to manage a dollar, will definitely take you from poverty into stability. And I think that that's the key. And then the extra part of that is, once they are able to understand financial literacy, and understand how to capitalize off their dollar and make it work for them, then we're able to understand that although they heard all of those no's, that guess what? God has the last word. God has the last word, and they're able to create their own destiny. And by creating your own destiny, that goes with entrepreneurship, being able to find your own way and creating opportunities, not only for yourself, but what about the men who are in the prison that do not have a loved one to support them, does not have that wife, mother, girlfriend to support them? Well, now that same person who applied that job or created that job now creates an opportunity for the next person to come home, because they know the situation. They understand what the no's feel like, and they're able to provide an opportunity, because the goal is to rise above poverty, rise above, you know, low income or no income, but to be able to create income and allow it to work for you.
Exactly.
And that's the nutshell of my organization. So let me just give the three components to it. So you have mental health, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. Okay. That is the three bullet points of who we are.
Well, all right. Well, you have shared an incredible story, and again, I apologize for the coughing. My allergies are kicking in today too. So it's like, allergy season over here all year round for me as well. But, I just want to, just the listeners, I'm hoping that everybody is truly listening, and, for you to tell your story and to be so open and bold with it, and to hear that there are so many other women out there like you who are living, behind the scenes, afraid to come out and be bold and realize that you're really hindering themselves and hindering their families because they're not telling and living the truth. And I think a big part of it is we all know everybody's afraid of the fear of the truth coming out because they're worried about basically what other people are going to say, or like you had to go through the journey of losing their jobs, all those things. But at the end of the day, if you are one of these women who are living that journey, you need to be have more faith. You need to be able to step out in the forefront and connect with Totisha Phelps. It doesn't matter whether you're living in Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, wherever you are living, you have the capability of connecting with her, because like what you were saying earlier, there aren't a lot of programs that I have ever heard of that truly work with women who are dealing with this situation. Because it's a reality. And I'm sure there are actually thousands of women out there that are like you, that don't know where to go and don't know what to do. But, Totisha, like I said, your story has been phenomenal, and I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing, your truth and your testimony, because it's hard. We all have certain things that we've gone through in our lives, and it takes some time to step up and be on the forefront, but you did it, and we're appreciative of that. But before we end this evening, just please tell everybody how they can reach you.
You can reach me through our website, which is LOCK, the letter N, and the word key, KEYPWA.com. We are there. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at LNKPWA. So that's Lock and Key Prison Wife Aftermath. Is just a acronym for it, Lock and Key Prison Wife. So you can definitely find us there. Again, that is at LNKPWA.
Well, all right. And again, I thank you for coming on this evening. For everyone else, I hope you all enjoyed this special evening of of courage and, of information and the story that we have heard far too many times, but nobody's doing anything about it. But we have somebody who is. And again, Totisha, thank you for coming on this evening. For everyone else, we are here every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio. You can download our mobile app on Google Play or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And again, thank you for coming on, and until then, you all have a good night.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. It has been a pleasure. We're looking forward to learning and hearing more from you later on in the future. But until next time, you all enjoy the rest of your evening and have a good night.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
We will be back next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Follow us on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/user/WSBI. View our new WSBI website anytime at www.wsbillc.com and on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.